Hello, sacred souls and curious wanderers. If you're new here, hi. If not, welcome back. Today's video is kind of going to be, I guess, the start of like a new little series that I would like to take on this platform, and that is of sharing with you my process and my journey of deepening my understanding of astrological topics. So we're talking planetary alignments, we're talking the zodiac signs, the houses, the trines and the squares, and the conversations that I had, and what does that all mean, and how can we live life more accordingly and more balanced with that. How can we keep the awareness of that in our minds and in our bodies and in our souls, so that we are living a more harmonious life. And so for today's video, I've sat down and done some research because we are officially in Mercury Retrograde again. And I know that this is such a stereotyped astrological phenomena that happens 3 to 4 times a year, and people go, oh, this isn't working and that isn't working, Mercury must be in retrograde again, sort of thing. And I have found myself even thinking sometimes, oh my God, is Mercury in retrograde? Because what is going on? And so I thought that I would deepen my knowledge of that now, because Mercury has just moved into Cancer. So we are in retrograde. It is in the sign of Cancer, and so I wanted to do some research into that, and I thought, why not share my findings with all of you guys who are curious. So yeah, with that being said, as always, I have my notes down here, so I will be looking down every so often just to make sure I don't miss anything. Yeah, so Mercury moved into retrograde on the 29th of June, and it will move out of retrograde on the 23rd of July. Now, from the research that I've done, there is also a shadow period after this where I guess the dust is kind of settling, the debris is, pull a mandarin out of the big stack at the supermarket and some of them fall down. A couple of minutes later, 4 or 5 minutes later, 1 or 2 might also fall down again as an after effect of what has just happened. And so that's kind of what the shadow period is. It's like the dust settling, and it's like taking those little baby steps and putting things into action to move forward with what we discovered during Mercury retrograde. So what is it? What does it mean astrologically, scientifically? What I found is that a retrograde is when a planet either overtakes us in its laps around the sun, or we overtake it. So for the planets that are closer to the sun than we are, it's when they overlap us. So basically, because Mercury has it takes about 88 days for Mercury to do a lap around the sun, as opposed to our 365 days, right? So 3 or 4 times a year, Mercury will overlap us. And in that time, from the perspective of Earth, it looks as though the planet is moving backwards in the sky and not forwards, which I found really interesting because I have been on the astrological side of things for quite some time. So finding out that scientific side was really interesting. So I thought I'd pop that in here. And so what does a Mercury retrograde mean astrologically? And so as the planet that rules communication, travel, contracts, technology, when Mercury is in retrograde, it is known as a time of that energy being chaotic and unstable, or unstable, however you want to put it. So it's not a time to be, scheduling in your travel plans, or, group Zoom meetings, or having these deep discussions with people about some difficult topics, because it is a time where that energy it's not really reliable. It's not something that is stable. We can't ground ourselves into it properly because it is so chaotic. And so on the other side of that, this is not a bad thing, because on the other side of that, you have an opportunity, you're being given an opportunity, we're being given an opportunity to slow down, to turn our attention inwards, and to focus on nurturing and reflecting and recalibrating, as opposed to the forward momentum, as opposed to pushing forward, as opposed to putting plans in action. Like, this is not a time to, you know, start a big project at all. So yeah, that is what the significance of a Mercury retrograde is scientifically and astrologically. Now, being in the sign of Cancer, what does that mean for us? And so during that period of the 29th to the 23rd of July, and its shadow period until the 8th of August, after that, Mercury is retrograding in the sign of Cancer. That's where we are at the moment. And so Cancer is the ruler of emotion and intuition and domestic comforts, if that makes sense. So family and things like that, and our foundations there. And so Cancer is a very, like, Cancer energy, people who have their sun in the sign of Cancer, they're very intuitive, they're very compassionate, they are fiercely loyal, and they're very family orientated people. Whether they have a broken home or whatever it may be, that something that they hold as an ideal is family. And so whilst Mercury is in retrograde, it is offering a time of introspection, of reevaluation, of recalibration, of understanding where our foundations lie there, in the aspect of family, of relationships with ourselves, you know, what emotional memory we have, what do we, you know, sometimes reflect back on the past, what is coming up now during this time that, you know, really affected us when it happened in the past, and what sort of boundaries, what sort of action can we take now to help balance that out. Yeah, so it highlights areas in which we probably need to set some boundaries or address some dynamics. It's also asking us to look at how we are communicating our emotional wants and needs, which is a big thing. I think communication, like I've spoken about before in my videos, communication is a very big thing these days, and we are all learning how to communicate more effectively and more balanced. And as we do that, being aware of periods like the one that we're in now and having Mercury retrograde doing what it's doing is allowing us to turn inwards and to reflect, how have I handled situations? How have I communicated my way through situations that have been emotionally charged in the past? Is that aligned with me? And how do I want that to look moving forward? So there's always room for communication. There's always room for improvement. And I think that having Mercury retrograde in Cancer is a really, really beautiful energy. And this is not just happening for you personally, it's happening individually to the people around you, and it's happening as a collective, as a whole as well. You know, like, we're all on a mass level experiencing this time to reflect on this part of ourselves, our emotional intelligence, our emotional wisdom, our wants and needs in those areas, our values around family, and how we show up in our dynamics in our relationships and how we want that to look. And so if you are not tapping into this slow introspective energy, then you are going to find this period quite chaotic. You're going to find this period really tough, really frustrating, really, the word grit is coming to mind, like sandpaper. Like, you're going to find it very abrasive. So the next thing, and probably the last thing I wanted to bring up before we chat about some reflection questions and journaling prompts and things like that, is how this isn't only about the emotional intelligence of how you communicate with others and what it looks like in your family, but also your boundaries and your relationship with that within yourself. And so where perhaps do you not leave room to feel your emotion fully? I think a lot of us on our healing journey get so caught up in healing that we forget to feel. We begin to experience an emotion and we know practically how we should be processing emotion and feeling it throughout our body and, allowing it to move through us and then not ruminating on it and moving forward with it. But it gets very easy to make that a habit and to not actually fully sit with that. And so I think Mercury Retrograde in Cancer is giving us an opportunity to really deepen and strengthen our own relationship with our self-care and how we talk to ourselves and how we hold ourselves and what expectations we put on ourselves in that area of emotion. So it is a really good opportunity to ask yourself, where am I not fully feeling my emotions? Why am I not fully feeling my emotions? Is there a pattern in the emotions that I'm not fully feeling? And how can, moving forward, I sit with them more consciously and hold them and process through them, as opposed to, just using them as something that needs to be healed, needs to be worked on, needs to be evolved. Sometimes it just is, and we need to be really careful and mindful that what we have been taught as we've grown up, we live in a world that's not very emotionally connected, and people who are overly sensitive and empathic are told that they're too much or too sensitive or they need to toughen up and things like this. And so perhaps you could ask yourself, where in your life have I been fed those narratives, and where in my life am I actually acting on a belief towards that still? Whether it's something that resonates with you now and that you believe now and that you consciously agree with, what areas in your life are you perhaps subconsciously still living under that process? And so this is, of course, obviously my understanding and my interpretation from what I have researched. But yeah, that's a big one, and that's a really, really beautiful energy to be working with, and it's a beautiful time frame. It's a beautiful sign. Like Cancer is such an emotional, intuitive, caring sign, and that is what we're being asked to give towards ourselves right now. How can we be empathic towards ourselves? How can we use our own intuition to nurture and to be loyal to ourselves and to, be devoted and be family oriented in a more balanced way? I know myself, there's definitely dynamics in the family that could be addressed and spoken about, and whilst I don't know that doing that during the retrograde is a great thing, reflecting on them during the retrograde is. So just becoming aware of those areas that you've had a belief placed upon you that you're still placing upon yourself. What doesn't align with you emotionally anymore? This is about emotional wisdom and intelligence. So what doesn't align with you emotionally anymore is pushing your emotions aside to get a job done, something that doesn't align with you anymore. And how can you move forward with space and love and loyalty and devotion to your own emotion and to expressing that? How can you communicate that more fully and more grounded and more intuitively. It doesn't all have to be practical. Yeah, like this is a very intuitive energy. It's a knowing energy. We have this all knowing within us, and I've spoken about that before in my intuition video, that we do have an innate knowing. We do have an innate wisdom, and we have the opportunity now to incorporate that knowing wisdom and that knowing intelligence with our emotional knowing and our emotional intelligence and that softer side of ourselves. So yeah, I think I'm gonna wrap it up there. Right after this, I am going to film a new moon in Cancer video as well, because that's another astrological exploration that I'm doing, and that is happening while Mercury is in retrograde. So it is a new moon in Cancer while Mercury is retrograding in Cancer, and the potency of that is something that is just, I think, so beautiful. And so yeah, I really do want to film that video. I don't know if it's going to be up when you watch this one, but if it is, go ahead and watch it. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that this gave you some sort of insight. And I hope that you've got some questions there to ask yourself and to perhaps journal on, and some confidence and some compassion to work through that with yourself. And yeah, just being gentle and being kind and being nurturing with yourself and your emotions during this time. Don't put any plans into action. Don't start a new big project during a retrograde, whether it's in Cancer or something else. Mercury retrograde is not the time to be doing that. So yeah, I trust that this video is going to find who it's meant to find. I would love to discuss this more in the comment section. What resonated with you, what didn't. This is all an exploration journey for me, and I would love to connect with like-minded individuals and have these conversations. So yeah, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video.